What it do, what's the deal, what's good, y'all? This is Shane Kidd, and we are here with part 3 of Rappers Deserve to Grow Old. And so, me and B Plus, we continue our conversation just on hip hop history in the Christian space. Also, just even getting into just like more of the reasons why it becomes a challenge for artists to be able to age gracefully in our space. And so let's get into the conversation and check it out.
Much about I got an opportunity to go to the premiere, but have you heard about the Mic Drop, the documentary
Yeah,
that they put together on Christian hip hop?
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I've heard of it, and it's like I'm waiting for it to come to Atlanta and everything. I'm
Yeah,
surprised they haven't pulled up here yet. And so,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm curious of when it's going to come out because I know I went to the premiere almost 2 years ago. Almost two
Mhm.
years ago, they came through Dallas, and I checked them out, and they said that was the last show, and then they ended up doing one in Tulsa last year. And I
Mhm.
heard that there were talks about it possibly going to Atlanta, but I think that would go a long way, the mic drop. But I feel like they did a good job on it. They did a good job on it. And it's interesting because there's some elements of, like, everybody knows about the whole thing with cross movement and tunnel rats and how it was just kind of like theology. But what about just like the social aspect of contextualizing what it means to be a Christian? Like, there was like this little back and forth. There was
Mhm.
actually a little back and forth like in the early 90s before cross movement even came about, between artists. And it kind of covers that. So I think it'll be good from a
Mhm.
standpoint of like, um from the standpoint of like of us not going through that again. But the good thing about it is I feel like we're in a place where we don't go through that as much. So it happened like in the early
Mhm.
90s, it happened in the early 2000s. um I don't hear a whole lot of it now. Every once in a while, I'll hear people spring up and say like, "You can't do it this way. You got to do it that way." Or some people still go off the deep end and say you can't do Christian rap. But I'll be
Mhm.
curious of when that documentary is going to come out, and
Mhm.
just how they're gonna market it. It is like very heavy on like the early 90s, and just my what I'm afraid of is that, well, I say maybe not afraid of, but what I want to keep my eye on is when it does come out, what that young crowd, how they're going to look at like that early style of hip hop.
Mhm.
Like, are they going to look at it and be like, oh my gosh, like the first song was called the Bible Break, like that, like that may not resonate with people nowadays.
Mhm.
So I'm curious of how that, or I'm curious of when it's going to come out, but I'm curious of how it's going to land as well.
Yeah. I think that's the interesting intersection you have with Christian hip hop is about the fact is it's like again it's it is Christians doing hip hop music, and so in one sense you have a crowd is like when they hear hip hop they have a certain thing in mind, especially the younger generation. And
Mhm.
so then to hear to hear like these older artists, I think it's like it's one of those aspects of like bridges are sometimes helpful for people to be able to connect things
Yeah.
together. It's like I think even like I don't know, it's on I think it's still on Netflix, the evolution of hip hop thing that
Yeah.
Shad K does and everything. Like I think you know they kind of do a good job of like bringing it back to the old with and bringing it to the bringing people up on the times, because it's like they're also like including like artists from that were influenced by that and of today of like, okay, I remember this, I remember that, and like I learned from this. And so along with those people telling the story. And I think
Hmm.
yeah, and I think definitely that does speak to something of like an importance of like, okay, how do things look, and like even like how do we connect together as a community, which kind of gets even into something that I didn't expect to expect to talk about. But since we kind of on this subject, it's like I guess it's like in one sense, it's like I think one thing that we often see in our spaces is like people talk about is like younger artists ain't listening to the OGs and everything, but at the same time, like the younger artists will say like, where are these quote unquote OGs at when we're
Yeah.
trying to like learn and build from them and all those things. I know, I remember Q gave props to like Selah and Dayton just like for them being ones as bridge builders
Oh
and
yeah.
everything
I
and all
think
that.
one of the biggest ones is Thizzle. Thizzle doesn't
Mhm.
speak a whole lot, but when he speaks, literally, I feel like everybody stops and listens. I
Mhm.
think he has a
Yeah.
very powerful voice in our space, and he's really unsung in the work that he's done. So, I think
Mhm.
you're right. There does need to be some type of handing off the torch because it's never been done. I feel like Ace and your guy Marcus.
Marcus.
Yeah, I think they had a talk. We are the movement on over the summer when they
Oh
around the time
yeah.
they dropped there, and I think they
Yeah.
talked about that to a small extent. And I'm happy that they have a show. Shout out to Holy Culture again. They're on every
Mhm.
Tuesday night at I think it's 8 o'clock Eastern. I always get thrown off because I'm Central, but they call everything based on the Eastern time zone. But they're
Yeah.
starting to tell some of those stories, and I think that and you might know better than I, but I feel like they're aware that that some of the things that Lecrae was trying to do, he didn't do it the best way, and it kind of hurt a little bit. I think that they're
Mhm.
aware of that, and they're being very intentional in trying to big up the next crew. Like he just hopped on the Miles
Yeah.
Minnick track, which is
Mhm.
something that like that's a bridge building moment to
Mhm.
see
Yeah.
Lecrae in the music video with Miles and who else was in there? Bats made a
Yeah.
cameo.
Bass was
Like
it. Yeah.
I feel like they're being very intentional in how they're
Yeah.
trying to pass this baton off. They're being very visible when it comes to those summer playlists.
Mhm.
They're featuring when they first started out, it was like Reach Records and a few features. Now you fast
Yeah.
forward 5 years, now it's just like putting on new artists and a little bit of
Mhm.
Reach Record features in it. So I feel like they're
Yeah.
aware and they're trying to pass this baton off better. And I'm happy about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely appreciate things like that, and then even just like just a little speaking to like some of like even like Craig when he was navigating the thing is like it's hard being the first of something. I will
It's
say
man,
that.
I don't want that.
And yeah. And so again, the spaces where Craig got to go, he was the first in a lot of those things because, learning how to and then of course learning how to navigate those with up on a public eye
Yeah.
is challenging in that sense. It's like recognizing it's like, you know, one thing is like, of course, like, people were, had these expectations of
Yep.
gravity being something it wasn't. It's like this man made what, again, one of the things that people don't know is like this man made gravity based on Ecclesiastes. Like if you think about like the songs
Ah,
that he's talking about of like, you know, Power Trip, Confessions of a Millionaire, all those,
yeah.
Falling Down, like
Mayday.
all, yeah, Mayday, all those are coming
Oh, I never
from
thought about
that.
that before. That's really
Yeah,
interesting.
this is things that people don't know because it's like he's not necessarily vocally putting it out there like that, and I think it also shows to, in one sense, a skillfulness that we kind of knock a little bit, and which one thing is dope that if you ever, again, I think it's a very good book that Brady wrote. It's like the art of Christianity from hip hop to Hollywood, just talking about like
Yeah.
the different spaces of like where Christians and art can land in. And I think one of the great analogies he made is like, depending on how much you know about something is how much you can integrate the analogies of them together. You know a little bit about like a flower and a girl, you can make a nice simple analogy. But the more you know about a girl, the more you know about flowers, the more you can see how you can interweave those things
Yeah.
into creating like this deep metaphorical picture. And I think that's one thing that Christian artists may miss because of like there was when most people came up in was a very much so a didactic style, a very
Yeah.
the goal was it's like we're looking to
Evangelize.
teach people. Yeah, we're looking to teach people. We're looking to proselytize. And
Exactly.
so yeah, and so and like that's our since that's our mission, it's like we're recognizing that, but also I think it also speaks to like about learning just not just to be good Christians but also being good artists. And I think like there's a space in our community that is about that and everything of like guys like Gerard Sanders and then Paris Carriz. They they do they work at their craft. Bass is another example, someone who's very studied and very well learned about the culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even like even in a sense of like those people, I think that also are kind of like represent what we talk about that contemporary. I think that Ohio community has something special going on, just with the fact of like the community they have, they're able to like exist in a space where it's like they're not having to play to the majority Christian hip hop culture. Like, so this is why you're able to get the things like Taylor Gray is able to communicate, Armand Wake Up, and like even like some other guys that are out there that are really like crazy, like Trace Carter's, Jonathan Baker, and all of them.
Jonathan Baker is cold, man.
Yes. And so yeah. And so I think that also kind of like even speaks to like some of the things that we talked about, because it's like one thing that we didn't talk about is how evangelicalism has influenced Christian hip hop, and like that gaze on it of like having to be in that way is something I feel like has it plays a little bit less of a role, but I think even still people are still thinking through like, okay, what can I say, what can I not say? It's like I share, people try to like share their struggles, like, yo, this is what happened, this is something that happened to me, but it happened like 5 years ago, and we don't see that. And I think it's like I think it's like it's also one of the kind of like getting into like the whole audience piece. I think it's also one of the reasons why some people may fall off, because I think the music speaks for them into like the early season of their Christian life.
I hope you like the conversation. I hope you like what we saw.